today, I will focus on one element that's on the minds of many Americans as they pay their bills at the kitchen table or walk the aisles of a grocery store. And that is lowering the cost of living. So every day across our nation, families talk about their plans for the future, their ambitions, their aspirations for themselves, for their children. And they talk about how they're going to be able to actually achieve them financially. Because look, the bills add up. Food, rent, gas, back to school clothes, prescription medication. After all that, for many families, there's not much left at the end of the month. I grew up in a middle-class household. For most of my childhood, we were renters. My mother saved for well over a decade to buy a home. I was a teenager when that day finally came, and I can remember so well how excited she was. I kind of understood what it meant, but we called her Mommy. Mommy was so excited, it just made us excited that she was so excited. Later in college, I worked at McDonald's to earn spending money. Some of the people I worked with were raising families on that paycheck. They worked second or even third jobs to pay rent and buy food. That only gets harder when the cost of living goes up. When I am elected president, I will make it a top priority to bring down costs and increase economic security for all Americans. I will take on the high costs that matter most to most Americans. Prices went up during the pandemic when the supply chains shut down and failed. But our supply chains have now improved, and prices are still too high. A loaf of bread costs 50% more today than it did before the pandemic. Ground beef is up almost 50%. Many of the big food companies are seeing their highest profits in 2 decades. And while many grocery chains pass along these savings, others still aren't. Look, I know most businesses are creating jobs, contributing to our economy, and playing by the rules. But some are not. And we need to take action when that is the case. As Attorney General in California, I went after companies that illegally increased prices, including wholesalers that inflated the price of prescription medication, and companies that conspired with competitors to keep prices of electronics high. I won more than $1 billion for consumers. So believe me, as president, I will go after the bad actors. And I will work to pass the first ever federal ban on price gauging on food. So now, the housing market can be complicated. I'm not new to this issue. As State Attorney General, I drafted and helped pass a homeowner bill of rights, one of the first in America. During the foreclosure crisis, I took on the big banks for predatory lending with many of my colleagues, including Roy Cooper, and won $20 billion for California families. So I know how to fight for people who are being exploited in the housing market. And I know what home ownership means. It's more than a financial transaction. It's so much more than that. It's more than a house. Home ownership and what that means, it's a symbol of the pride that comes with hard work. It's financial security. It represents what you will be able to do for your children. And sadly, right now, it is out of reach for far too many American families. There's a serious housing shortage. In many places, it's too difficult to build, and it's driving prices up. As president, I will work in partnership with industry to build the housing we need, both to rent and to buy. We will take down barriers and cut red tape, including at the state and local levels. By the end of my first term, we will end America's housing shortage by building 3 million new homes rentals that are affordable for the middle class. We will make sure those homes actually go to working and middle class Americans, not just investors. Some corporate landlords buy dozens, if not hundreds, of houses and apartments. Then they turn them around and rent them out at extremely high prices. It can make it impossible for regular people to buy or even rent a home. Some corporate landlords collude with each other to set artificially high rental prices, often using algorithms in price-fixing software. It's anti-competitive and it drives up costs. I will fight for a law that cracks down on these practices. We also know that as the price of housing has gone up, the size of down payments have gone up as well. Even if aspiring homeowners save for years, it often still is not enough. My administration will provide first-time home buyers with $25,000 to help with the down payment on a new home.
We have been watching an incredible press conference by Kamala Harris in North Carolina, where she has been outlining her revolutionary plan for America as one that will revitalize the middle class in a way that has never been done before. This is a truly groundbreaking, transformational policy that she's outlined tonight, and we'll go through it in great detail as we quickly step through some of these key points that she made. There are probably 11 key points, which I'll quickly run through here while we wait for our guest. We have one of the key discoverers, the investigator who first came up with this landlord price gouging on algorithmic platforms. We're awaiting his call, and we expect him to join us anytime soon. We will discuss with him exactly how he believes this proposal will be enough to give the people that need it the most leg up and also control those corporate landlords that are such an issue for everybody. Let's run you through what Kamala Harris really spoke about there in her 11-point plan, which is revolutionary, as I mentioned, and really discusses these key issues that have been dogging the middle class for so long. Firstly, grocery prices. Nothing could be more key to tackling inflation than grocery prices. Harris is pledged to tackle price gouging in her first 100 days by proposing a national ban and empowering the FTC to investigate big grocery mergers and price fixing in meat supply chains. A big factor in everyone's budget every week, every month is how much it costs to live and how much it costs to feed your family. She's put that on her top of her list at number one. The grocery prices are her first point of combat with the big corporate entities that sell those groceries to us at inflated prices. She's proposing a national ban on the practice of price gouging, which includes all these grocery sellers and the manufacturers coming together and deciding that a loaf of bread will cost you this much, and that's it. Every store basically sells it at the same price. That is, of course, not very competitive, not very exciting for anybody, and not very American, even though the other side will convince you that this is somehow a communist plot. It is very American to protect free trade and competition in the capitalist markets. Number two, the housing cost. The vice president has proposed $25,000 in down payment assistance. First-time home buyers will be able to get $25,000 as a first-time down payment assistance. That will take a lot of people who could never imagine owning a home into territory where they can finally buy a home. It is such a dramatic shift in what makes people who are just in that bubble of affordability for houses. This will be remarkable. $25,000 in a down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. Wow, that will change the economics of the middle class of the American economy forever. Of course, there's always the caveat. She has to win this election, which means you got to get the House to be majority Democrats, got to get the Senate to be majority Democrats. Then you can get all these things. So it's caveats. You got to work hard for this. Okay. Number 3, rental costs. Harris has called for expanding the tax credits for affordable housing developers and legislation to curb predatory rental practices. This is really crucial. The rental costs are driven up by what some people say is too much regulation about where people can build and that it's too expensive to build in different places. She wants to go and cut that red tape, makes it more easy for developers to build, but also, more crucially, it gives developers an incentive to build affordable housing. James, so good for you to join us tonight, this afternoon on Narativ. We're big fans of yours over here. How are you today?
Good, Zed. How are you doing today?
I am really good. I don't know if you were able to watch all of Kamala Harris's address there, outlining her big plans for transforming the middle class with her economic policy. Were you able to hear it?
I was able to get parts of it.
Now, the reason we have you here is because, as far as I'm concerned, you're the first person who told me about the algorithmic price gouging that was happening in the rental market and in other markets. In fact, you've pointed out this everywhere, but particularly in the rental market, it has been a tremendous hazard to anyone trying to own or rent a home because the price has been raised so much by the consortium of people who have bought these homes. I mean, these are basically corporate landlords that have bought a lot of the rental properties in America and are now price fixing them. Is that a correct assessment of what's been going on across America?
To some degree, what's really at the heart of price gouging, if that's the right term, is what VP Harris is up against is Reaganomics. We go back to the 1980s, and Reaganomics was a new economic plan. What that did was gut regulations and taxes on the supply side of housing. But a lot has changed since then. Since Reaganomics, new technology has taken hold, generally referred to as revenue management.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's not the same revenue management that we learned about back in college because everything has changed. Since Reaganomics was passed, we have entered the digital age. We've left the industrial age, where mass production yielded mass profits for companies, where monopolies were taking over. Monopolies today look very different than 50 years ago. Today, price fixing is happening on these shared platforms. Revenue management takes massive amounts of data. They developed a new type of computer operating system called the digital operating platform. Each industry has its own. It's also referred to as a management platform. For example, in housing, it's called the property management platform. In hospitality, it's the lodging management system. In the auto industry, it's called dealer management. Each of these industries have these platforms, and part of this platform includes a revenue management module. Historically, someone would gain a monopoly. A good example is you go back to 74. And I know it's a long time ago, but don't forget Reagan was in 1980. And in 74, the Department of Justice went after this huge monopoly called AT&T or Ma Bell. And in 84, Ma Bell was broken up. And because it was broken up, we now have a new company called Apple. Apple would never have happened without breaking up that monopoly. So price gouging is maybe another name for price fixing, but price fixing doesn't happen the same way it used to 50 years ago. Today, the ability to set prices and price gouge means you have a concentration of companies within an industry who have allowed this revenue management technology to take over their operations to the point where it's the technology who sets the prices and no longer the individual businesses. So the big thing that VP Harris in her administration, hopefully she will get a chance to become our next president, what she will need to take on is Reaganomics, and we will need regulation in this new type of age we're in, regulating these new revenue management platforms where the price fixing is taking place.
There has been, since Reaganomics, a new attempt to create these cartels that are fixing the prices of everything. It doesn't necessarily only apply to housing, although it's very obvious and apparent in housing. It potentially exists in any sector where you have this new kind of algorithmic digital platforms. We've talked about housing, but there's also a similar thing in the hospitality sector. There's a thing called Rainmaker, or used to be called Rainmaker. Maybe it's called something else now. But
Yes.
essentially, it fixes the pricing of hotel rooms in certain markets. So if you're going to Atlantic City on any given night, you get a hotel room for $180 almost at every hotel in Atlantic City, because that's what the algorithm tells the hotel owners to charge. And even though they might have lots of available hotel rooms, you've got to pay that money if you want that room. Same thing applies to housing. We've got all these corporate landlords who are buying up homes left exposed because of the previous financial crisis. They've been buying them up for cheap and renting them out, but not renting them all out, just renting the amount so they can keep the prices up high enough. So you've got, potentially a large amount of available inventory in each market where people can't get access to that inventory because that's not available for rent. The stuff that's available for rent is fixed at a certain price. So it's fixed at, I'll give you an example. Here in Toronto, you don't get a one-bedroom apartment for less than $2,400. No matter where it is in Toronto, it's $2,200, $2,400 for a one-bedroom apartment. That is way above the reach of many, many people's revenue. They just don't make enough money. They are forced into basically homelessness. So when we talk about the homelessness crisis in America and in Canada, you're talking about corporate greed and corporate cartels conspiring by fixing these prices in order to make as much money as they can, because they don't care. They're creating this homeless crisis alongside their price fixing.
That's correct. It's housing, it's groceries, it's gas stations. I mean, you can sell a gallon of gas for $2.50 a gallon and they make a profit, or they can sell less gas at $4 a gallon. You can sell eggs at $2.89 a dozen, or you can sell less eggs for $4 a dozen. You can rent out 90% of your housing at much higher rates and make a great deal more profit. And that's because you have an algorithm that's deciding how much to charge and who to rent. It's based on massive amounts of data collected in revenue management platforms. That's the first thing they really need to go after. We've entered this new digital age. And just like in 1929, in the book, I go back and talk about the financial crash of 29. And what they found out afterwards is that we didn't have any rules or regulations. And that's what led to the crash. We're in that same boat now. Our economy has shifted to this new digital age, and where we use these massive platforms, where monopolies are individual companies, but monopolies are now based on concentrations of companies pricing on a common pricing platform within an industry that is ran by a algorithm. So algorithms have taken over the pricing process. We need new laws and new entities to handle this. For example, we have the FDIC to handle banking. We have the Security Exchange that was developed after 29 to take on Wall Street. We need a new entity to take on revenue management. The problem is revenue management today.
Is Kamala Harris's proposal to ban this practice of price gouging and to instruct her regulators to go after price gouging in terms of landlords and the rental industry, is that enough, in your opinion?
The issue we have is, like I said, I'm working with the Department of Justice. I've turned over my work to them, and that was the basis, the start of the lawsuit against RealPage and the use of that revenue management platform. The issue is they'll go after them. It could take 10 years to resolve this. We need new laws. And I'll give you an example. Since you and I last spoke, I had been working with the San Francisco County Board of Supervisors, Aaron Peskin's office. Since you and I last spoke, the County Board of Supervisors have outlawed the use of revenue management in San Francisco County.
Right.
Now, that's just the first step. The issue is most people are completely unaware about these platforms and how they work. Part of what my book is meant to do is enlighten our public about how the digital age has transformed our entire economy and what it's doing to people. We need new laws and regulations to handle this new technology. And until that's done, anything else is short term. This technology is powerful. For example, everybody talks about rent control. Rent control is really a short-term fix because this technology has been trained to circumvent it. For example, in New York City, they've issued and passed rent control laws. I read a recent study where they looked at what was happening because there's still all these people getting priced out of their homes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what this technology does, it's developed a new type of fee, non-rent fees. In fact, they found 81% of these people now had non-rent fees added to their bill. Not just a little, it was $671 on average of non-rent fees added to the rent bill.
What are the fees for?
Things like air conditioners, stoves, improvements to the property, landlords' legal fees. They're just charging fees. The problem is they don't explain what a lot of those fees are. So people don't know what to do with them. The landlord can't foreclose on somebody on those non-rent fees. But if you happen to end up missing a rent payment, even by 4 days or 5 days, they can take you to court and charge you not only for your missed rent and fees, but also for all these non-rent fees.
Right. And legal
So
fees and interest on top of that, and you name it.
To really fix this, we need to address the problem. Hopefully, President Harris will need a House and a Senate that will help her craft new laws and regulations to bring competition back into the market.
Because what she's proposing is 3 million new homes in 4 years, all very well and good if you're actually going to be able to fill those homes. If the developers don't offer those homes to people because they don't qualify for the rent, then those homes are not going to be affordable. They're just going to be new homes sitting empty, some of them.
Don't forget that in 2017, the National Low Income Housing Coalition issued this nationwide study saying we had a shortage of 7.4 million affordable homes. Since 2017, the industry has built 9 million homes and rental units. And just a couple of months ago, the National Low Income Housing Coalition came back and said, after building all those 9 million homes and rental units, we still have a shortage of 7 million homes and rental units because they're not building anything affordable.
Right.
And the problem is the construction industry uses these same types of platforms like RealPage. I mean, in the construction industry, it's called Procore, and they manipulate the market and they're able to jack up prices. And I think she will do great things. I lived in California for probably 20 some years, and I watched her grow from, all the way through, including becoming the state's attorney general to becoming the senator. So I watched all of her do that. And she is very brilliant, but she's going to need help because we're dealing with the effects of Reaganomics. And Reaganomics basically gutted regulations on businesses. And the gutting this regulation on businesses allowed this revenue management technology to take hold in our industry. And so we need new laws and regulations to combat the non-competition that's now happening.
Have you been in touch with her campaign at all? Have they been in touch with you about your work and your findings?
I have not gotten that far yet.
Well, I hope they are. I hope they're watching and listening because James Nelson has been at the forefront of uncovering this price gouging and price fixing and in the rental market, but also in the other markets. He's published another book about the algorithmic platforms that are causing such chaos and basically increasing people's prices of living tremendously. Last time you spoke about the prices of rentals was like double the amount that they actually should be. So if a home was worth $2,000, it should actually be rented to you for $1,000.
Yes, which makes more sense for what we're earning, what our income capacity is. What this technology has basically done is doubled the cost of our housing. They want to call it inflation, but it's not inflation anymore. Inflation is now driven by price fixing and market manipulation in all of these industries. You can't call it inflation when the housing industry is raking in record multi-billion-dollar profits. The insurance industry is raking in multi-billion-dollar profits. Every industry is now raking in these new multi-billion-dollar profits.
And so you've got a stock market of 40,000, but poor people still can't afford their homes. And it's not coincidence, perhaps, that on the other side of the aisle there, the Republicans are running a property developer as their presidential nominee, and a venture capitalist who basically has funded some of these algorithmic entities that you've described, backed by Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, who are also funders of these algorithmic entities, and Harlan Crow, who we know from the other scandals in the recent past involving Supreme Court justices, is also a property developer. I mean, we are looking at the people who will benefit from this are the handful of people who are running for power and supporting the presidential ticket on the Republican side, where everybody else gets to suffer. And yet they're presenting themselves as somehow populist, when in reality, all they're doing is figuring out ways to protect their own bottom line and gouge everybody else for the hard-earned money that they've earned. And it is about time that this came out. And it's about time that I'm so glad Kamala Harris has put this into her economic agenda. I'm so glad that there is an attention being paid to this issue, because the average American is suffering for no good reason. A handful of corporate billionaires, Jared Kushner, another property developer. It's basically a who's who of people who will benefit from these algorithmic platforms that price fix these prices for average Americans. And that's basically where they want America to go in terms of the Republican Party. And what Kamala Harris is making available here to Americans, she's got to win the House, she's got to win the Senate. If there ever has been a battle cry for every American to go out there and fight hard to win this election in every district and make sure that Democrats are elected up and down the ticket, it is this, because it will directly impact everyone's future, except maybe
that's great.
Donald Trump and company.
In chapter 12 of the book I'm getting ready to release, I talk about single family homes and what's happening in that industry. And let's not forget that this industry in 2001, we go back to 2001 after 9/11 and the attacks on American soil that disrupted our economy. And Wall Street investors lost $1.5 trillion in assets. 600,000 people lost their jobs. 20,000 businesses closed. And don't forget that George Bush came out with the same program. To rebuild the frozen economy, he wanted to build 5 million homes for minorities, Black and Hispanics, to improve home ownership for them. Well, the problem is there was no regulation over it. They instead of going after the supply side, which again is Reaganomics, they went after the demand side, the consumers. So they handed these folks, first-time home buyers, their down payments. And then they made their qualifications. Basically anybody could have qualified. It used to be percent of your income is spent on housing. Well, they moved that to 50%, and in some cases more than 50%. Then what happened between 2005 and 2006? The price of homes doubled in 1 year. For example, in Miami, it increased 241%. And in 1 year, 20 million people were priced out of their homes. And in
20 million people? 20 million people between 2004 and 2005.
Yes. Were priced out of their homes. 37 million people could no longer afford the price of housing. That's now at 43 million. The issue is that these pricing platforms were in effect in 2001, 2, 3, 4, and 5, when these prices escalated. That's what the technology did. And these builders all made massive amounts of profits, but it broke the economy. So what we have to be careful for is we can't just go after the consumer side and make things easier for the consumer to buy. We have to go after the supply side and make sure the price of homes are affordable. I know the industry is saying they can't afford to build a $300,000 home. So an affordable home in America is $300,000. the average income in America is $17,000. 30% is a $300,000 home. Well, we have to get homes back to that 30% of the income ratio. And that can only be done by busting up the monopolies, but the monopolies are not companies. The monopolies are these pricing algorithms.
Right.
Different. And that's where we need new laws to break that up, to bring parity back between income and what we spend on housing and other costs of goods.
So when Kamala Harris talks about, empowering her FTC to go after these landlords, that's
Not enough.
You got to go after the people providing the algorithmic platforms that are price fixing on behalf of these landlords.
Correct. The problem is we don't have laws on the books to handle these algorithm pricing platforms. So we need new laws and regulations to manage them.
Hopefully someone from the Kamala Harris campaign is watching. And if not, I'm going to write them and make sure that they talk to you, James. I don't know if they have this read on the situation. I think they think their plan they presented today is enough, but it seems maybe not. It seems that maybe we need to go even further to curb these predatory rental practices and really ban or severely limit how people can use these platforms. You can't allow these algorithmic platforms to determine whether people can have homes or not. We talk about AI taking over the world. This AI is forcing human beings into the streets because they can't afford their homes. It's significant impact on people's lives. We're not talking about, maybe they can't afford a luxury car. No, they can't afford a roof over their head because of algorithms. That's all part of the Silicon Valley, the Silicon Bros, the Peter Thiels,
Yes.
Elon Musk, all of that people who think that they can control the world through money and data and are trying to do that. Even if it means steamrolling the interests of every American, they will do that. So this is crucial stuff that people pay attention to and really call the Harris campaign, call your senators, call your Congress people, tell them that you want them running on this in this next election, that this is a pivotal plank for their platforms and it's vital they hear about it from every American who's watching this. And hopefully this message continues to come out through your work. James, tell me a little bit more about the book and how it's going and when can we read it?
Let me share just one more thing with you that I think is really important to understand. In 2017, Forbes came out with an article. Between 2006 and 2018, the number of billionaires tripled.
Yeah.
Every day, $2.5 billion are transferred from the working class 90% to the upper 10%. And what I discovered and I point out in my book is that the vehicle transferring that money is the revenue management platforms. No one's even looking at them. The Department of Justice is in the process of suing them. Like I said, that's going to take at least 10 years. Ma Bell, it took 10 years to break up Ma Bell. And look at, we got Apple. We got our iPhones. We got, of course, now we have another problem. We're back into another narrative monopoly with Apple. But for 40 years, there was competition on phones. Look at the technological advances we got and what we have now versus what we had then. Mm-hmm. The same thing is true with housing. We have got to regulate this technology. It's got to be fair for everyone. The book is basically done. It's going through editing. I'm hoping to get it out October, November. It takes time to get a book out.
It's a good book. I got to say, you should just put it out there because it is a very, very good book. And I hope if you haven't got a publisher yet, that people are out there, at least if they're listening and watching. This is an important book. This work that James has done and his work with the Justice Department in tackling the real predatory practices that are going on right now. This is vital for people to understand and hear.
Yeah. Check out my website. I've added some content that really explains what's going on in the industry. And it will help.
What's the website address again, so our audience can also have it?
JamesMartinNelson.com.
JamesMartinNelson.com.
Yeah.
And we'll put that on our podcast when we put it out. By the way, you talked about Apple and their monopoly because they just started gouging creators like me by adding 30% fees on our minimal earnings from our subscribers and fans. Apple doesn't need the extra 30%, and Steve Jobs is supposed to be a creator's platform.
My only example is from 74 to 84 is when that lawsuit took place. The DOJ broke up the mobile.
Yeah.
Between 84 and into the 2000s, look what it did. The problem is Apple's part of these unregulated platforms today. They have created a new monopoly. But look between the 90s and 2015, before these platforms became mature and transferring $2.5 billion a day from the working class to the wealthy.
So you're saying these platforms are stealing the wealth of working Americans, transferring directly into the hands of these moguls, these corporate titans, people that we know are on the Republican side of this campaign. And it's
$2.5 billion a day.
wow.
Yes.
That's astonishing.
That's a Forbes article in 2017. They issued that.
Well, James, thank you again for all the hard work you've done in bringing this to light. And I also just encourage anyone who's watching and everyone who will be watching and listening to the podcast, this is the kind of thing that needs to be raised as an issue. I know that she's put it in her economic plan, but it doesn't sound like she's got the full prescription that James is proposing here. So as much as anyone can, make sure that they campaign. And, when you come across campaign officials during your next 3 months, make sure that they understand the importance of this. They need to get in touch with James. And they need to watch our podcast to make sure that everybody takes this issue seriously, because we need the right prescription. It's all very well for Kamala coming up with a plan, but if it's not going to really fix the problem in a hurry, Americans are still going to hurt, and they will be facing the same problem 4 years from now. In the convention next week, I hope people raise this with as many delegates at the convention. Keep bringing up this issue. I'm amazed that it's gotten to her. I'm thrilled that it's gotten to her, because it wasn't an issue.
Yes.
It just, we spoke maybe, I don't know. We just spoke about
A
6
month
weeks
ago.
ago. Yeah, it was not an issue. And this was not something that either Biden or Kamala Harris had raised. And since our conversation, maybe it's because of us, but maybe it's because of other factors. Nevertheless, it has now become a centerpiece of her economic plan, if not the centerpiece of her economic plan. It was on Biden's agenda as well. Let's keep making sure that they understand that there's more to the prescription than we've already been able to share with them. James, thanks so much for joining me at such short notice today. It's jamesmartinnelson.com. And thank you very much for being on the show, and good luck with all your work. We'll have you back on again. I feel as passionate about this issue as you are, because I think it's so important. So
it is.
I hope everyone takes it seriously, and I'll be right back in just a few seconds with more coverage about Kamala Harris's economic plan. Thanks very much, James.
Thank you.
So let's pick up where we left off there. James Nelson was terrific to join us at short notice. Let's quickly review some of the other big news that was happened today from Kamala Harris's economic plan, so you can get a full picture of what she's proposing. It's all big deal stuff, and I hope you don't mind if we just take a few more minutes to talk about grocery prices. She's pledged to tackle price gouging in her first 100 days. She's proposing a national ban on price gouging and empowering the FTC to investigate big grocery mergers and price fixing in meat supply chains. Hopefully, that includes going after these revenue management platforms that James was just discussing there. It's super important that these management platforms that are basically predicting and dictating prices across every sector, including the grocery sector, are taken care of. The vice president also proposed a $25,000 down payment assistance plan for first-time home buyers. This is great. It's going to make more people able to afford the housing. But if the prices keep going up because they keep the price gouging going on, it's not enough. It's certainly a stopgap measure, and it's great that first-time home buyers will be able to access that money, $25,000 in down payments. That is what happens if you elect Kamala Harris. They also proposed plans for 3 million new housing units in 4 years. But as we point out, there are plenty of housing units available. They're just not being sold to the homeless. Homeless people can't get access to them. So again, Kamala Harris needs to refocus this about not just building new homes, but making the existing inventory of homes available to people, which means bringing the prices right back down. And I know that sucks for homeowners who think, hey, my home is worth $3 million. It was worth $1.5 million last year. Guess what? It's the same home. It's the same home. So you just owe more to the bank and whatever. Just keep bringing the prices down, because everyone needs to benefit from it. Rental costs. Harris has called for expanding tax credits for affordable housing developers and legislation to curb predatory rental practices. That curbing predatory rental practices is exactly what we've been talking about with James Nelson here. This idea that there's been price fixing on these algorithms. And again, just a reminder, what we underlined earlier on, all the firepower that's coming from the friends of the Republican side. What are they doing? Who are the people there? A property developer at the top of their ticket, a venture capitalist who funds a lot of these algorithmic platforms. Peter Thiel is his big funder. Elon Musk is his big funder. And don't forget all the data that they're using for this broadcast, Twitter and X, to subvert and suppress our coverage, for example. All of that comes from the same thinking, allowing algorithms to dictate exactly who gets to be heard in this very crowded influence of the marketplace. I guarantee you that somewhere in the X algorithm, I'm suppressed. Other people are increased and their voices are heard more loudly because, the intention for Elon Musk as he programs his algorithm is probably to say, hey, make sure that Republicans and Democrats can have equal amount of say. Guess what? The Democratic policies are way more popular. Equaling them out is actually screwing around with the balance of influence ideas. Elon Musk needs to be investigated for that too while they're at it. Why not launch an investigation into the way Elon Musk is using algorithms to basically dictate what people think? The child tax credit, this is amazing. A $6,000 tax credit for newborns and restoration of the $3,600 per child credit for middle and lower class families. That's been proposed. It affects 100 million people and will give them a tax break. Not the rich people like the GOP wanted to suggest, but the average American gets this incredible tax break. This is exactly what's needed to restore confidence in government and confidence in the American dream, which in fact has slowly been deteriorated, and we can tell now why. As these billionaires have been siphoning, what James has said, $2.5 million a day out of average working Americans' lives. Unbelievable. Number 5, taxes. Harris plans to expand the earned income tax credit and maintain President Biden's pledge not to raise taxes on households earning under $400,000 annually. Now, this is important. I was anticipating that Kamala Harris would do the opposite. I was anticipating that she might bend to the richer backers of her campaign and drop Biden's insistence on raising taxes for the wealthy and corporations. She wasn't very specific here. In the past, we've seen Joe Biden promise that he's going to increase the taxes from 8% for the average billionaire to 22%, which sounds about reasonable. He gave us actual figures. We noticed that Kamala's not giving us those figures. She's saying the people under 400,000, they're not going to get the tax increases. Suggests that people above 400,000, they will get the tax increases. Don't let the billionaires run away with this. Let's make sure that the pressure is on to make sure that Kamala Harris knows that you want the billionaires taxed at a fair rate. No tax on tips. The vice president endorsed eliminating taxes on tips for service workers with some caveats to prevent abuse. There is a deep concern that this tax cut doesn't only impact people who serve drinks or food at your average bar, but actually will end up being a loophole for the very rich to tip people instead of pay them and get away without having to pay the taxes on that. Prescription drug prices. Harris proposed a $35 cap on insulin and a $2,000 annual cap on out-of-pocket prescription tax expenses. This is phenomenally important. She's also provided plans to work on medical debt cancellation and expanded the Affordable Care Act plan subsidies. And paid leave. Harris has previously supported 12-week paid leave legislation. The vice president called for raising the minimum wage, though no specific figure was mentioned, and the Fed's independence. Harris vowed to maintain the Federal Reserve's independence, contrasting with former President Trump's stance. Thanks for joining us. I'm really thrilled at today's live coverage. At Narativ, we're all about providing you a very unique, independent view of what is going on. We are not beholden to the corporate entities. We're not beholden to the billionaires. We're not beholden to the advertisers. We are beholden to literally the truth. And beyond the truth, I'm also beholden to all the people who are so generous with their donations. Thank you all for being supportive of Narativ throughout these 8 years. We need way more support to keep doing this kind of coverage that provides Americans the truth, that provides Americans with clear, factual coverage of what's going on. We've been doing it for 8 years because we believe so much in democracy, and we know that if we lose this fight in November, it's very hard to get this back. Hopefully we'll get Kamala Harris as our president, and hopefully the end of the Trump mania will be over. And then hopefully by then we can expose all these wrongdoings by the billionaire class, by the venture capital class, by the Silicon Bros. But all of that requires time and energy. And I got to tell you, the amount of personal attacks I get on a regular basis in every aspect of my life, it's unbelievable how much effort they're putting to stop me from doing these broadcasts. I am not going to waver. I'm going to continue to deliver these broadcasts because I know there is a truth out there that you're not getting told by the mainstream media and their corporate, their billionaire owners, and sometimes their foreign owners. Don't forget, the interests of those corporate owners and foreign owners is not about the American well-being or the American middle class well-being. But that is what I am about. And it is my absolute determination to continue to provide you with this kind of content. However, I do need your support. So if you've been missing from supporting Narativ, this is a good time to join. I know a lot of people, including the Harris campaign, are asking you for money all the time. Well, I'm joining that line. I need your help. So please consider joining us. The best place to do this is at narativ.org, Narativ.org. That's my main website. You can subscribe to the newsletter there. There's a big box on the front page. There's lots of free content you get in that email. So, it's not only going to be paid content, but some of it is paid content. And that paid content is how I fund Narativ. $8 a month on the website, narativ.org, Narativ.org. It's also $8 a month at Substack, narativ.substack.com, Narativ.substack.com. However, they charge me fees. It comes out as much less by the time I get it. And now, as I mentioned, Apple are about to charge even more for membership fees and subscription services to companies like mine. So they're going to charge our loyal supporters an extra 30% to support Narativ. If you're paying $8, it's going to be like $10. It's ridiculous that Apple is doing this, but we still need your support. So whether it's on patreon.com/Narativ, Narativ, or whether it's Narativ, Substack.com, or if it's at Narativ.org, where we prefer you go to subscribe, that is your options. Nobody does what we do. Nobody brings you the truth like we do. And we've been doing it for 8 years. The Trump-Russia scandal all the way through to the coverage we're providing right now about these revenue management platforms has come because you've supported it. Every single scandal we've exposed, every single twist and turn of the presidency and a single twist and turn of the Biden presidency has been brought to you because we've been able to stay focused on bringing you the truth, fact-based information, fact-based reporting that you can only get here on Narativ. So that is my big appeal to you to help safeguard the future of America by providing truth and honest reporting as we head into this crucial election season. Thanks very much for being here on Narativ. It is almost 4 p.m. on the East Coast. We shall see you again next week.
One day, you'll tell the story of autocrats, crooks, and kings who came for our freedom. A story of citizens who stood up to tyranny and won. The people prevailed and renewed an old vow to a more perfect union. And that was just the beginning. The story continues. Narativ, where truth lives.